Let's get to some breaking news. In a key Florida primary race, CBS News projects Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the winner in the Democratic primary for the newly created 20th congressional district. So let's go live now to CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion in West Palm Beach, Florida. So Nikole, let's talk about the district and the results.
Yeah, well, this is obviously very significant because this particular race was being closely watched since this district had been redrawn. Of course, Florida redrew its congressional map earlier this year, and that had a lot of impact on this particular district because Debbie Wasserman Schultz was drawn out of her old district. She made the decision to run in District 20, which historically has had a black representative. And you can see by that graphic that the other candidates she ran against were all black, and many of them made the case that a black person should represent the district because not only has it happened historically, but that they would better understand the needs of the community. But what we instead saw is that in essence, the vote was split. And so Debbie Wasserman Schultz was able to get the majority of the vote, which is significant because it was unclear whether or not she would be able to do that. In terms of the candidates that she ran against, you know, there was some debate early on in the race as to whether or not some of those candidates should coalesce and consolidate behind one candidate to make this race more competitive. Ultimately, that did not happen. But one candidate I spoke to, Elijah Manley, said he thinks that that was a mistake, that they should have gotten behind one candidate so that there was a better opportunity for a person of color to potentially make this race a bit more challenging for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He did, in fact, tonight call Debbie Wasserman Schultz to concede to her. Now, what I will tell you, though, in talking to voters in this district today, many of them told me they don't necessarily see color, and these were people of color, voters of color, that they were really voting more those who supported Debbie Wasserman Schultz on her experience. Obviously, she has been in Congress for a number of years. She was the former DNC chair, so she had a lot of experience, a lot of name recognition, which is why she thanked her voters tonight after those results came in.
Sure. What can you tell us about the governor's race?
Well, the governor's race is very significant in the state, certainly one of the bigger races that we're watching as well, not only because it is a statewide race, but it's also an open seat. Governor Ron DeSantis is term limited, so he is not running again. And so this leaves a wide open field to vie for the governor's mansion this fall. So the front runners in these respective races, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side at this time, appear to be Byron Donalds, who is a congressman who represents a district in West Florida. And you also have on the Democratic side lead contender in David Jolly, who actually was a Republican turned Democrat. So those are the two candidates who up until today have been leading the pack in terms of polling, in terms of money raised, and both candidates, quite frankly, have kind of pivoted their messaging more towards the general election and towards each other, kind of sizing each other up. But obviously, you know, this is a race that has yet to be called, but the expectation was that those two would likely match up in November.
Sure. Let's talk about the candidates running in the primaries for U.S. Senate. What can you tell us about them?
Well, in terms of the Senate race, keep in mind that the incumbent senator right now is Ashley Moody, and so she replaced Marco Rubio when he was named as Secretary of State. So she was serving out the remainder of his term, but obviously running now for a full 6-year term. So she did have some competition in this Republican primary, but given that she is the current sitting senator, has been widely supported thus far. The real interesting dynamic in this race is on the Democratic side and who potentially might challenge Moody. And so there were two candidates, Angie Nixon, who is a state representative, who is from the Jacksonville area. She is a community organizer, kind of got her start there, has really challenged Governor Ron DeSantis over the years, kind of worked her way up to become a state representative, and so is really well known in that part of the state. But she also identifies with the Democratic Socialist movement, and so that is very notable because we're talking about a very red conservative state like Florida, but she has certainly been able to build some traction with her campaign. Now she is running against Alexander Vindman, who is a combat veteran. He was also a key witness during President Trump's first impeachment, and so he is someone who kind of struck more of a moderate tone, someone who really has been working to build support among more moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, independents, to try to carve a path forward should he be successful and move forward onto the general election. But this race right now appears to still be very competitive, which again is significant considering one of these two candidates is a Democratic socialist.
Yeah. All right, Killion. Nikole, thank you. All right, let's bring in CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. He's breaking down all of the predictions. CBS News already predicting some winners in Florida. Break it down for us.
Hey there, Julia. Yeah, I do have some projections for you. Let's talk about the governor's race. That is as expected. It'll be Byron Donalds on the Republican side. It'll be David Jolly on the Democratic side. Again, that is in line with what was expected. Now, I want to talk about the Senate race real quick. You were just talking about that with Nikole. Incumbent Ashley Moody, that's on the Republican side. And yes, Angie Nixon on the Democratic side. I do want to note, and I'm going to flip over to the chart here for Senate battlegrounds. You'll notice of all these states, Florida is not on it right now. And what that means is that going into this, you expect Florida. It's been a reliably Republican state. It profiles one in many respects. So not necessarily on our big list of battlegrounds. However, I do want to show you this because you were talking about those House races. And what's really important contextually out of there is this is a map showing where redistricting had a potential impact, states that redrew their lines. And you see so many red states here, or states where the Republicans, we believe, have picked up an advantage. And Florida is a big part of that. Maybe 3, maybe 4 that would lean their way. So these primaries set up, certainly, them trying to pick the candidates that could then take advantage of, in their minds, what would be Republican-leaning districts. That's one big reason we're watching Florida.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you about the Senate race in Alaska as well. So we have former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola running for U.S. Senate in Alaska. It's a state that has not had a Democratic senator since 2009. So why do Democrats think they have a shot in this election?
Yeah, it's also a state that President Trump won by double digits. So the answer to that question is Democrats believe they have a strong candidate there in Mary Peltola. She's won statewide office before. That's number one. She also, although she didn't win, she ran ahead of Kamala Harris in that 2024 election. But the big part of this breaks down to how Alaska conducts its election. And what it does today is a primary in which all the candidates run on one ballot, Republicans and Democrats, and the top 4 go on to November. And then in November, the case is that they have a ranked choice voting. And if nobody gets 50% initially, then the lower ranked candidates, their voters as second choices and third choices then get applied up to the higher vote candidates. What that means is you could see, depending on what shakes out from this primary, how many Democrats, how many Republicans are in that mix, something in which the Democrats believe they would have a shot to ultimately get a plurality or over 50%. So that's the structural reason why, and don't be surprised if we're back here in November talking about that and talking about overall Senate control.
We'll see you then for sure. Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, thank you so much.